Hi there, welcome to the Fierce Factor podcast. I'm your host, Kaeli Lindholm. And I think it's time for us women to shift the conversation in business and step into our feminine leadership to do the most iconic work the aesthetic industry has ever seen. Each week, I'll be bringing a powerful dose of strategy, sarcasm, solutions, and sass that will rev up your creativity and ignite your brilliance as you link arms with me along our shared path of personal and professional growth in 20 minutes or less. Let's go. Hey there, Fierce Factor. This is Kaeli Lindholm here. Welcome back to episode 37 of the Fierce Factor podcast. Listen, y'all, it is 2021. Well, technically not yet, but when this podcast publishes next week, we are going to be kicking off 2021. And with that being said, I am going to be bringing you today a little kick in the butt. And this is for my amazing female leaders out there. Listen, girls, it is time to rethink your good girl reputation. So this episode was really inspired by a classic book I'm reading called Nice Girls Don't Get the Corner Office. And in this book, Dr. Louise Frankel lays out really a series of unconscious mistakes that women make to sabotage their careers. And she talks about things like not playing the politics in your company correctly, or letting people take credit for your ideas, or if you're in a conference room, sitting at a board table, or in today's world, on a Zoom, and someone speaks over you and you just kind of let them get away with it. She talks about, a series of these mistakes and these kind of nice girl things that we let people do, and men do, and other women do, because we are just nice girls. And while I was reading this, I remembered a podcast episode by Eleanor Beaton, the GOAT, that she published back in 2018 called Good Girl Habits to Break. And I felt like this kind of was a tap on the shoulder to share this message that I have with you rock stars here as we're heading into 2021. And the spirit and the tone of 2021 is all about channeling your inner power and just figuring out who you are and letting it shine. And so I'm going to tell you a little story. So this month I was invited to guest lecture at a private university here in California. And I was asked to come speak to an entrepreneurial class. So a bunch of seniors who were getting ready to launch into their first career and business ventures. And so in preparation for the lecture, the professor sent me a list of questions that these college students had related to tips on finding the right career path, leveraging social media and digital marketing to get exposure in the marketplace, and ideas for positioning themselves to advance in roles that they will eventually step into. So essentially thinking about, if I take this specific role, as a startup position, how do I eventually get to where I want to go? And it was really an honorable experience, but it was also a time of reflection for me to think back, to being a young, hungry, starry-eyed college student with really nothing but hope and optimism for the future. Can you remember back to those days when, you just really saw this wide open runway of opportunity for yourself? And, I'm lucky I happened to hit the jackpot with an incredible boss and mentorship out of college. And I really attribute much of my professional success to the value that I placed on learning and implementing in pursuit of becoming the leader that I had to look up to. And so my advice to them was really worry less about the tactics of finding the job itself, but really focus on identifying a great leader and company to work for, and essentially play the long game. Don't chase the bigger paycheck, but the bigger opportunity. And then finally, to think about how they're building their personal brand really from day one. And it's interesting to think, from this perspective, I wanted to say, be patient, trust the process. And I thought, how annoying, they're going to have somebody come guest lecture who's going to tell them to be patient. That's so frustrating, But it is interesting to be sitting in a different seat and to look back and think about what kind of advice do I wish I had had, or if I had that advice would have really helped me through the process or given me at least a compass or, some direction to think about as I was navigating my career. And, a lot of our conversation was around social media. And I do believe that social media today will allow these kids a major advantage to learning really in depth about the brands that they're looking to work for, and hiring managers will give them better accessibility and visibility. But on the flip side, when it's not used with focus and intention, the social media aspect can really be a major distraction. It can make them normalize themselves in comparison with random strangers and give them an unrealistic perspective of what it actually takes to seek out, earn a position, and grow with a strong, sustainable business that's in alignment with their personal values. And truly too heavy of a reliance on social media, I believe, will inhibit their ability to make authentic human connection and learn the critical, timeless skills for selling themselves and forging genuine win-win relationships. As I was talking to these college seniors, I thought, gosh, this advice sounds eerily familiar to some of the things that I discuss with my clients. And literally that day, one of our clients came to me and said, Kaeli, there's been a proliferation of injectors out there, and the barrier to entry is so low. Truly, anyone can call themselves, quote unquote, a master injector, and it can become frustrating when so much of the advice for business owners in our industry, it's so average or watered down, and it continues to keep us in the same category as everyone else. And I asked her, what specifically do you mean by that? And she said, well, she gave a story about how she had worked with somebody who literally had advised her to build her practice as a cookie cutter image of someone else's practice. Another practitioner did it this way, and this was successful, and you should do it just like that. And she was very frustrated by that. And I totally understand her frustration. I mean, after literally years of blood, sweat, tears, the last thing she's looking to do is dilute her uniqueness and her personality. I don't intend to make this podcast about social media itself, but I think that has been one aspect of business that is a tactic that many of us have become very reliant upon, or we are letting it really control or shape or guide the decisions that we're making in our business. And that was kind of my point with these college seniors, was that use it as a tool, but you need to learn how to build, your brand, your reputation, the way that you show up every single day, showing up on time, showing personality, being presentable. Like, these are things that are timeless, and someday social media will be gone, and you need to be developing skills that are related to human connection. And I think that's where truly we're headed in 2021. I mean, I think that we as human beings are craving that. We want more human connection. And so, back to this new client of ours who's amazing, and I'm so excited to be working with her, and I totally understand where she's coming from. And so I think it's important for us to delineate between the boss babe injector out there and the real impact makers and thought leaders who are in position to establish themselves as preeminent figureheads, be it practice owners or aesthetic industry leaders. I get it. We're working with women in our academy and, in our community who are looking to build real companies, lead powerhouse teams, and do iconic work. So is there a barrier to entry that's low? Yes. And I think that's for every industry too. I don't think that that's unique just to our industry. I think that that's one thing, that is one aspect of social media where the playing field has really been leveled out. With that being said, if you are looking to build a company in the top 2%, you have to stop acting and talking and communicating like the other 98%. To become a preeminent leader, we have to learn to leverage our unique attributes we have as females in the industry, as preeminent figureheads, as thought leaders, to communicate, to position ourselves, and to negotiate our intrinsic value. And as women, I am kind of zeroing in on us females here. I think that the days of the proverbial glass ceiling, it's not really there. It doesn't have to be there. Certainly there's, inequalities in many different aspects, but there is opportunity. And I think 90% of the time we are getting in our own way. And I think that the answer is not to just start showing up to the boardroom or to our interactions in our business and acting like men. We're women. We don't need to, right? We have unique skills and characteristics and qualities that we can leverage. And, as we've been working with a growing number of female business owners, leaders, and corporate high flyers in our academy, I'm just really inspired to draw upon, some of the practical wisdom that I've gained through my decade of experience of climbing the corporate ladder in Fortune 500. And now, earning myself a seat at the executive table as the CEO of my own company, in which case the interactions that I have with men and women are typically, the heads of companies. And so I'm having different kinds of conversations than I did when I was working under a corporate structure. And so I'd like to share with you my opinion, in this episode of how being the good girl that we were raised to be may actually be holding us back from owning our power. Now, I'm not advocating for picking fights or coming out with guns blazing or ball busting or flipping off your family and turning into a selfish, unempathetic woman. What I'm saying is that in order to step into your presence as a leader, you must be clear on your goals and prepare your own agenda accordingly. So thinking about this, how are you showing up every day? How are you stepping into a room? How are you showing up in front of your team? How are you showing up on stage? Are you calm, clear, and confident? Are you on the rested edge? Are you approaching your business with a calm sense of clarity and certainty and enrolling others into your own magnetic energy? Listen, it's going to be impossible to show up like this if you are practicing good girl habits that we have been programmed to subscribe to. And so I want to talk to you today about 3 habits that I believe are holding back the good girls from advancing into preeminent leadership. So habit number 1, spending too much time worrying about what other people think. So I was out at the driving range the other day hitting golf balls, and a man came up to me and he made a comment about my wide stance. So basically the way that I position myself and set up my feet in my swing. And I do work with a golf coach, and he's never really said anything to me about my stance, although I have noticed it's a little bit wider than most. But I also have very strong legs and hips, AKA, soccer legs from playing soccer my whole life. And I have a strong swing. So many of the techniques we work on happen to support this fact. And, quite frankly, I pay an expert because he's the expert and I'm not the expert. So I'm at the range and this guy says to me, "Wow, you have a really wide stance." And I joked back at him saying, "Haha, yeah, you can thank my coach for that." And he laughed and turned around and started hitting balls again. And it's funny because I think just being a girl, and sometimes I go to the range and I'm like the only girl at the range, and it's, undoubtedly not anyone hitting on me. That would be nice and a nice ego boost. But it's usually somebody just coming up to tell me what to do because they feel like they know more than me, like as if I have a sign on my head saying, "Come teach me how to play golf." But anyway, that's for another day. And so, I just kind of get used to like, okay, that's, I have a coach, leave me alone kind of thing. And so we laughed, and then he turned around and started hitting his balls. And then 5 minutes later, he walks back over to me and he said, "No, really, I think your stance is too wide." And, at that point, I kind of became irritated and I was kind of snapped back at him. And I said, "All right, thanks. Well, I only need one coach at a time." And then he turned and walked away like he got it. But the problem is that comment that he made to me stuck in my head. And I started noticing I was creeping my legs closer and closer together. kind of, I guess, subconsciously, but okay, what if my stance is too wide, And so I start putting, my legs together closer, and each swing, I'm swinging and it's like I'm shanking balls, and it just completely threw off my swing. And I couldn't get my swing back, and I became eternally frustrated, and I ended up just like leaving the driving range and whatever, the rest of the balls behind. And so later in that week, I went to my golf coach and I told him about the story. And anyway, he said, no. We're positioning your legs where they are for a reason. Like, this is your swing, and on and on. And here's the thing. We do care what other people say. We're female, so we're built to care. And that's also our superpower. But the reality is we can't please everyone. In fact, in my case, with this guy, it's like running around trying to satisfy other people's agendas will ultimately just take us off track from accomplishing our own goals. And the sooner we learn to accept that the people who matter will accept us and our goals as they are, and the people who don't accept us and our goals as they are, they simply don't matter, we will find ourselves in position to make decisions that support our mission, stay focused on initiatives that mean something, and actually catapult our business forward. So something we work on with our clients is understanding that as you advance, it's critical that you start becoming responsible to yourself. And as a leader, it's up to you to set an agenda and hold yourself and your team accountable, even if it's unpopular, even when random driving range guy gets in your head, right? Stay in your own lane. I also have found that rarely do good girls negotiate. Good girls typically see negotiation as confrontation. And when in fact, negotiation from my perspective is a method of advanced communication. It lets the other party know what's important to you, and it clarifies what will allow you to do your best work. I recently negotiated a large contract in which, after the contract was signed, the CEO came to me and said, "Wow, you're a good negotiator." When I think what he actually meant was, "Wow, I wasn't expecting you to negotiate with me, because it's rare that good girls stand up for themselves because they're too worried about being seen as brash or overbearing." So when you stay focused on your true goals and your value, you won't need to worry about what other people think. All right, habit number 2, taking on too many obligations. Can I see a hands on this one? All right. I know it. Good girls have a hard time saying no. One reason is we want to please everyone. Another reason is we feel like we're being selfish by prioritizing ourselves over others. Whether I'm working with a female MD or a practice owner or even a practice manager, we're looking at her ability to command space and hold accountability to the activities that are actually driving the business. Listen, there will always be a to-do list, but the sign of a great leader is not checking off to-dos. It's identifying high-value activities and delegating or eliminating those which are not. A good girl will try to fit in as much as she can and will run herself down to a point where she's not showing up as the calm, confident, and rested leader that is bringing magnetic energy. If you're busy running around in service of other people every day and not protecting your boundaries, it's going to affect your energy, your ability to do your best work, and the focus that you are able to bring to the business. As your business grows, you will always have more on your plate. Okay? So let me say that again. As your business grows, you will always have more on your plate. So you have to break the good girl habit of taking on too many obligations and preserve your time, energy. And when you do this, watch your cash, your time, your energy multiply. Okay? Habit number 3, showing up inauthentically. And I believe this stems from something called imposter syndrome. And this is basically where someone underestimates her own abilities and consequently overestimates the abilities of other people. Like, I encourage those bright-eyed college students to recognize that they're building their personal brand immediately. The way you show up in everything you do creates habits that define your character and ultimately your reputation. And long gone are the days when there was really separation of personal and business affairs. Just Google your own name and see for yourself. I remember when I was a sales manager for a medical device company and sat down with a client for dinner in Dallas, and she was so incredibly genuine and warm, and she shared stories about her patients and staff and special celebrations they had in the office. And while I had no experience with her as a patient, I thought to myself, man, she must be an amazing doctor. And a year later, a friend in Dallas called me looking for a breast dog recommendation. And I remembered that single dinner I had with that warm physician, and I referred her, and she ended up going and treating her for a mommy makeover. So it was just as an example in that situation where that doctor was just authentically being her, and when you overlook your own value, it becomes natural to want to emulate or show up on social media or in any environment as someone you think that others want you to be. And this inauthenticity is always recognizable. Before I started recording this podcast, I was literally listening to another podcast by a really awesome life coach named Brooke Castillo. If you don't follow her, you should listen to her podcast. And she was telling this analogy on kind of a different topic, more on just really how do you show up as you, and do you know if you're being you authentically? And she talked about a peach, and she said, when somebody takes a bite of a peach and they don't like the peach, you don't blame the peach. In fact, you don't blame the person eating the peach. It's just the peach is the peach. The person doesn't prefer the peach, and that's okay. The peach doesn't try to be the apple. But, apples are better, right? Just look on TV. They're more advertised. They're used in more analogies. There's more types of apples, right? And I was laughing because I was thinking about that. The peach, no matter how much they try to be the apple, they're never going to be an apple. They're still going to be a peach. The peach is the peach. So are you a peach or are you an apple? And I think when you start thinking like that and thinking more about who you are and being okay with the fact that people don't like you because maybe you're not their cup of tea, right? You're a peach and they don't love the peaches or whatever, or a cantaloupe. Like you're the fruit you are, And I think when you think like that and you realize that we're not meant to please everybody. And if we just focus on being us, then our people are going to come to us. So I really encourage you to focus on your own agenda and show up as your authentic self. You're enough. You're perfect the way you are. It may be different than what the industry is showing you, but that's a good thing. To create category of one leadership, you will have to disrupt the status quo. You will have to be different. You'll have to be you. And as a woman, you have an incredible aptitude for intuition, empathy, human connection. Use these to your advantage, but don't fall back into the good girl habits that are holding you back from reaching your highest potential. You're in charge. So boss up, sister. Let's go. All right. So, hey, if you're new around here, maybe this is the first Fierce Factor episode you listened to, or maybe you just started listening and you want to take this conversation to the next level, head over to our website at klcconsultants.com/join to get access to weekly inspiration, tactical and practical resources delivered direct to your inbox. I promise you there's no spamming, just handwritten, authentic communication from yours truly. Ladies, I'm so excited for 2021, and it is time to rethink that good girl reputation of yours and go out there and power up. So thanks so much for tuning in, and I look forward to chatting with you next week. Thank you for joining me for this episode of The Fierce Factor. If you enjoyed the show, please make sure you subscribe so you can automatically get new shows every week. I'd also love it if you left us a review. And come join the conversation online. If you're an aesthetic industry owner, operator, or leader, please join my free Facebook group, The Tribe of Fierce Aesthetic Leaders, a community of ambitious, purpose-driven professionals who collaborate and share best practices for growth in business and life. I'm honored you tuned in.